Welcome to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast, where we obsess about sports, pop culture, and politics, but mostly sports. Here are your hosts, Randy and Steven.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Excruciating Minutia. Before we begin, I'd like to ask if everybody would like to check us out on excruciatingpodcast.com to find links to all the different places where you can listen to us. And today we'll be talking about Major League Baseball, which opened up spring training, or at least one team did, today on Monday, which is when we're recording. But before we get into that, there was some other news that is worth mentioning today, and that would be the signing of one Kareem Hunt by the Cleveland Browns, a little off-season NFL news. And Steven, I know that one kind of caught us a little bit by surprise. It wasn't news we were expecting to see today. Before it gets lost in the off-season shuffle and before we get into baseball, I think it is worth definitely mentioning and talking about. Were you caught by surprise, I would imagine, by Hunt's getting signed today?
Yeah, kind of was. I was kind of surprised that anyone would have signed him prior to the NFL deciding what his penalty was going to be. But I guess a team wanted to kind of get out in front of it. You know, he's from the Cleveland area. The general manager who is in Cleveland, John Dorsey, was the general manager in Kansas City when he was drafted. So there's some common threads there. But yeah, I was surprised. No two ways about it. It's not a time of the year you would expect to see much in the way of NFL signings.
It makes me wonder if there's some knowledge that maybe the Cleveland front office has now gotten, and whether it would be from Hunt or from someone in the NFL in general. I can't imagine it could be for Roger Goodell. That would actually mean he was doing his job. And we can pretty much both agree that when it came to the whole Kareem Hunt fiasco, much like the Ray Rice fiasco before it, that Goodell and the NFL were always two steps behind what was going on and clearly just not interested in, doing what they claim to want to do, which is, police in some aspect the behavior of the people that represent the quote unquote shield, as always we used to hear, protect the shield, right? When it came to players being disciplined in the past. I'm surprised, just not necessarily that a team took a chance on Hunt. He had enough talent. He certainly was outstanding when he was playing for the Chiefs prior to the suspension. Has a tremendous amount of ability, was a fantastic rookie last year, but he carries with him now a lot of baggage, a lot of issues, and I could see teams taking a chance on him. If you told me a team like, I don't know, Tampa Bay, that has offensive weapons and a young quarterback and a pretty good offense, but was a dumpster fire at running back last season, if you told me they had taken a chance on him, I would have understood that. But Cleveland really didn't need running back help. They had Nick Chubb, who was their second-round draft pick out of the University of Georgia in the 2018 draft, had an outstanding season. Well, once Hugh Jackson was fired and Chubb actually started to get the ball, he nearly rushed for 1,000 yards. He averaged over 5 yards a carry. He was a really big play back out of their backfield, explosive. Anytime he touched the ball, he was a threat to take it to the end zone. From week 7, I believe that was right around the time Hugh got fired, wasn't it? It was week 6, 7, somewhere in that ballpark. That's when Hugh was shown the door,
yeah.
right?
Yep, right around there.
From week 7 until the end of the year, Chubb ran for right under 800 yards, 797 total. Only one man had more than that in the entire NFL. That was Ezekiel Elliott. So Chubb was your second best running back in all of football. Why do you bring Kareem Hunt into a situation where you have a very young, very underpriced rookie talent who's as good as Chubb is? And oh, by the way, Duke Johnson is still on that team. Another running back who's not that old. He's 25. Cleveland had given him an extension. Now, granted, we know in the NFL, contracts are not quite the same as what we're used to seeing in other sports. There's very little guaranteed money. But he did sign a contract that was a 4-year deal. And you would say, well, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. It did have $7.7 million of it guaranteed. So again, it's Cleveland was not the team that really needed a running back. And I know we're of differing opinions here, but I look at it and I think if I'm Cleveland, the last thing I want to do is bring in a player that brings a whole lot of controversy with him. Somebody that's going to get your sponsors uncomfortable with you having him on the roster based on what we saw in that video that was released with what Hunt did and what happened and what we were able to see. You're going to have controversy. Maybe your sponsors don't like it. Maybe you have people picketing outside your stadium. Who knows what the reaction is going to be like in the clubhouse? Again, there's controversy you bring onto your team unnecessarily. Again, you're a team like Tampa. You don't have a running back. You can kind of weigh the pros and cons. Lots of controversy, lots of issues, but it's at a position we have a lot of need for. And then maybe you kind of weigh it. Cleveland didn't have a need at running back. That's why I don't understand the signing, and I think it's a bad move. The only way I think it's a good move is if somehow or another they end up finding a way to flip Hunt almost immediately to another team and then get something for him, then it's a good move. If they flip Chubb, that would be a move that wouldn't make any sense since Hunt will be a restricted free agent after next season. He's on a 1-year deal apparently with Cleveland. But again, I just don't get it. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. And the first thought that I had when I saw the news was that Cleveland was back to doing Cleveland Brown type things. But obviously, I think you have a differing opinion on it. As you said to me before we did the podcast, it's about acquiring talent, I guess, at a cheap cost.
Well, we don't know what that cost was because they haven't published it, but it was a 1-year contract. He would be a restricted free agent at the end of the year, which means that they can retain his rights if they choose. I think in the NFL, what you always have to do is you just have to attract as much talent as you can. With injuries and with player movement and contracts. You know, we talked the other day about the ridiculousness of NBA contracts. The NFL contracts are almost as laughable because you said that Duke Johnson had that long-term deal, a 4-year deal that actually in reality was a 2-year deal, which he's completed. So they can cut him or move on from him. And let's be honest, he wasn't that great last year, right? Kareem Hunt is a significant upgrade from Duke Johnson. We're not even comparing apples to oranges here.
No argument on that one.
We're comparing apples to I don't know.
Spoiled tomatoes?
I'm thinking of something worse.
Doggy doo-doo? Duke Johnson's got talent. I would like to think he wasn't. I think he does. I think he just wasn't utilized properly.
Because he doesn't have talent.
That's your take.
My take was he was a very usable running back when they were terrible. When they were 0-16, does it really matter who your running back is?
Oh, I could have been the running back at 0-16. They still would have finished 0-16, right? I guess that's kind of the point.
That is correct.
I will say one last note on this because we don't want to spend too much time on it. You said you think bringing as much talent on as possible is a thing. I think there are situations where you have running backs that can complement one another. We saw in New Orleans the Kamara, Mark Ingram dynamic that went on here, where you had Ingram, a power back, who really was a in-between the tackles type of runner, get those hard yards. You had Kamara, who was better out open in space, a little speedier, a better pass catcher. Those guys complemented one another. And in the NFL, to limit running back usage and the wear and tear, you see some teams that have gone to the dreaded running back by committee type of mindset. Not that you can't have one back that carries the load. Perhaps this is what's going on here, except Hunt and Chubb seem to be very much broken out of the same mold. So let's say the NFL comes back with a very short suspension for Hunt. Let's say it's only 4 games. How do you manage a backfield with both Hunt and Chubb without there being some sort of situation where a player can't get into a rhythm, isn't used properly, maybe hard feelings, and someone feeling, I'm better than this. Why am I not getting the ball? I mean, that was the problem with Nick Chubb at the start of the season. He wasn't getting the ball because the Browns kept splitting carries amongst a lot of people, including the aforementioned Duke Johnson. I'm just wondering if this is just going to be a bad scheme fit also, if nothing else. And this is not to say that I don't think Hunt should get a second chance in the NFL. This isn't even so much about that. I just think it was a bad fit for him. I think maybe Dorsey was letting his own personal feelings towards a guy he had initially drafted, or at least was involved in the drafting of, maybe come into play there. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. Your thoughts, I guess, on scheme. Can he and Chubb actually coexist in that backfield together if it came down to that?
My guess is that the Browns front office had some discussions. My guess is that they had some discussions with some of their sponsors to say, hey, if we bring on a guy like this, is this going to be a problem? Maybe they said to Kareem Hunt, hey, we're going to sign you this year, but you're going to be the backup. And there's no complaining about that. We're giving you your opportunity to get your first foot in the door, but you'll be our second string. You'll be behind Chubb. And that he was okay with that because he has to kind of earn his way back into the NFL, knowing that if he does what he's asked to do and he keeps his nose clean and does exactly what he's supposed to do and serves a suspension, whatever that suspension may be, that the following year he can go out and try to find a better contract and a better situation. It's hard to be that first team to take a chance on a player that's coming back. There's not many teams that are going to do that. Dallas, Oakland, those are the two that come to mind that will typically sign a guy that no one else will touch with a 10-foot pole.
Well, if Oakland wasn't trying to completely dismantle everything before they pick up and go to Vegas, then, that might have actually been another team I could have seen taking a chance on him. But, this is one of those we'll have to wait and see how things play out, and we'll get more information, I'm sure, in the days and weeks to come as far as what Cleveland's mindset was, maybe the details of the contract, what's going to be going on there. But it's, like I said, it kind of was an out of the blue NFL news blurb from today that definitely caught my eye, definitely caught yours. But the main thing today, at least for us, that we were looking forward to.
Can I make one more point about that as well? What does the NFL hate more than anything? To not be in the news, right?
I guess I was going to say good officiating, owners paying for their own stadiums, anything the fans really want to see. I mean, I thought these were the things the NFL hated. You caught me off guard there with that question, but you're right. You're right. Being out of the news is traditionally bad for anything. We talked about that on a previous podcast. No such thing as bad publicity, right?
Right. And what happened this weekend? The launch of a new football league. A lot of people were talking about it today because of some of the changes that they have in their rules. One of the most amazing things I saw, I didn't watch much, but I watched like maybe 10 minutes of one of the games, and there was a replay that needed to happen. And the way they do the replay officials is they call them a sky official. There's an official in the box who's on camera and mic'd, and they broadcast it live, uncensored, the discussion that is going on as they're looking at the video. So it's completely transparent. So you understand the thinking. You may not agree with the decision, but at least you understand where the thinking process was leading to that decision.
That actually could lead to some pretty funny moments where somebody's looking at a replay going, oh, shit, I have no idea what I'm going to call on this. I don't know what's going on. That could happen, right? Unfiltered stupidity and ignorance potentially on a grand scale if that was implemented in the NFL, I'm thinking.
It was a reasoned argument, which is better than you normally get. And, when have you ever heard of an NFL official ever have any discussion about any call that they've ever made? So,
good point.
So there was a lot of buzz about that today on talk radio. About, did you watch it? Because it got pretty good ratings and people were interested, and, discussing that the football was kind of, substandard, which isn't really that surprising when you hear some of the names. It's like, oh, yeah, that guy kind of sucked in college, too. Yeah, that makes sense that he would end up in a place like that.
I have 2 words for you for substandard.
What's that?
Christian Hackenberg. I believe when you look up substandard in the dictionary, there's a picture of Christian's photo from the Jets media guide from his tenure there.
The only thing worse than having Hackenberg as your starting quarterback, what would be worse? Being the backup to Hackenberg? And that would be Zach Mettenberg from LSU, who is the backup to Hackenberg. Hackenberg, Zettenberg. Apparently they got a Berg thing going.
Well, I was going to say they might be terrible quarterbacks, but that's a hell of a Scrabble score if you can go ahead and get enough tiles for that. So
that's true.
But you know what? This might be a topic we can talk a little bit more about, the new football league and the XFL apparently being revived out of the grave, a la The Undertaker. There's your pro wrestling reference for that. Maybe that's something we can talk about in a future podcast. Maybe a little bit of extra football that we didn't have a year ago in the form of these two new leagues, and maybe even a look back at some of the past league. We were both old enough now to remember the USFL when it started and the hopes and dreams back in the day of that particular league. But to more established leagues, to more established institutions, we have Major League Baseball spring training opening up. We are now in the countdown officially to opening day. And we are talking about publicity or bad publicity or good publicity or lack thereof. Well, one of the big stories in baseball is not necessarily the one that they would like to see people talking about as we go into the start of a new season. And that is a couple of your largest free agents, certainly your top two free agents that came onto the market this offseason, still remaining unsigned as of this recording, that being Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. They're not the only two that are unsigned. You have a list here of some other guys, including Craig Kimbrell as another one, Dallas Keuchel. There's been, not everybody unsigned. There have been a slew of signings. So this isn't exactly the era of collusion that we saw back in the mid to late 80s, I guess that was, back in the day when Andre Dawson was an MVP player and couldn't get a contract except for a 1-year deal that was almost for the minimum with the Cubs. It's not quite that, but definitely not what baseball, I think, wanted to see. And Harper and Machado still looking for teams at this point. Or maybe that is what they wanted to see. I'm not really sure. Let's go in order of these guys. We have Harper, of course, as the big fish. Where's he going at this point? Where make a prediction. We already had a bet on this.
I'm sticking with it. I still think he's going to end up with the Nationals. I think the issue with both Harper and Machado is that they're both holding out for numbers that they're just not going to get. Bryce Harper was told a number by his agent, Scott Boras, of 10 years, $400 million. I don't care how good a player is. I don't believe we will see 10-year contracts anymore. Tell me the last 10-year contract that worked out for any team, and it will be the first one that has ever worked out for any team. Literally, these teams get 2 or 3 years into the contract and they're looking to move the contract, figure out something else. I mean, heck, there's been 6 and 7 year contracts that have bitten teams in the butt with a year or two into them. So, I know that Bryce Harper and Manny Machado are in their prime, but let's be honest, neither of them have won anything. Machado has a reputation of being a little bit of not a hustle kind of guy. He's not going to run down to first. He's a guy who could potentially be a clubhouse problem. Bryce Harper is a very good player, but he's not Mike Trout. He never will be Mike Trout. And he's asking for money way beyond what Mike Trout is making, way beyond what any player has ever made. And it's just not going to happen. So until they come off their demands, these contracts aren't going to. And I feel like there's a lot of teams that are kind of slow playing this as well, because they're like, well, no one's gone and made Machado any kind of big offer.
One team has. We'll get to him in a second.
That is alleged. All right. We don't know for sure that was a contract that was definitely offered.
God, I hope it wasn't.
I know you hope it wasn't. But here's the other thing is, if you are one of these players, does it make more sense to take instead of a 7-year, $170 million contract, which is just crazy that you could even get that kind of money for Machado. So what is that, about $25 million a year, right? Would you be better off taking like maybe a 3-year, $90 million contract? I believe that's something that Harper was offered from San Francisco, is that they're looking for like maybe a 4-year, $120 or $130 million contract. I'm not sure if these guys are going to accept money lower. I mean, eventually they're going to have to, otherwise they're not going to play. But
they're not going to sit out, right?
Right.
I think at this point, the Harper and Machado thing is very interesting, and I think you nailed it exactly with what teams are doing. We're looking at two players who are both very young, They both made it to the majors extremely young, and Machado and Harper are both going to be, they'll both turn 27. So they're 26 currently, will both turn 27 this year during the course of the season. So 10-year contracts would be taking them through the rest of their prime. And the problem with 10-year contracts or contract that length is you look and you're not getting a player's prime. You're getting maybe, in some of these cases, a couple good seasons, and then you're stuck with all of these seasons and you're owing a player a ton of money, and the contract just becomes a huge albatross. Albert Tross. Did I say Albert Tross? Because that would be the Albert Pujols. That would be the Albert Pujols contract that the Angels are currently dealing with. When they signed him, that was back in 2012, was the first year of that deal. He is under contract to them all the way to 2021. And oh, by the way, once his player contract expires, he has a $10 million personal services contract that starts kicking in. So he's going to be signed for another this season and then another 2 seasons. He's still owed $87 million by the Angels. And that's a lot of money, even for a big market team to pay. And let's be honest, Albert Pujols hasn't really been the Albert Pujols we remember from his prime. The last time he was really that guy, I think he was wearing a Cardinals uniform. He had a 906 OPS in 2011, the last year he played with St. Louis. The highest OPS he's posted in an Angels uniform was the 859 he posted in 2012. What if I told you he hasn't posted an OPS higher than 790 since then? That he actually had a season under 700 for OPS. That he was at 700 last year. He's just not a very good player anymore. He's not horrible. There's certainly worse players than him. But the Angels really got one pretty decent season out of him in 2012. And after that, it's been kind of mediocrity. One good year out of 10. But then again, they signed him to some 10-year contract when he was 32 years old, right? That's the difference, I guess, with the lengths here. But I do think you nailed it on the head 100%. That teams have realized they don't want to get caught up into these big contracts with all this money guaranteed. They want roster flexibility. They want payroll flexibility. And as good as Harper is, and as good as Machado also is, however good they could be for any team that signs them, there's always the potential that something goes wrong. Maybe there's an injury. Maybe there's a decline in production. You mentioned Machado being a guy who might not have the greatest work ethic, as there was talk when he was with the Dodgers that he wasn't hustling, that he wasn't playing hard. I am frightened to death that the team rumored to have the high bid on Machado right now are my White Sox. At least Buster Olney had reported that they had offered him, according to what you have here, 7 years, $175 million. He seems to me, and this is completely talking out of my rear probably because, I don't know him personally, but when I hear stories about how he wasn't hustling, he wasn't necessarily playing hard when he was with the Dodgers in the middle of a pennant run, it really scares me into thinking he's going to be one of those players, and there have been many examples of it throughout Major League history, who once that check hits the bank is going to say, you know what, I got paid. I think I'm good now. And it would really worry me if my White Sox were to pay him that, because I also know the way the White Sox run their operation, or at least the way they've kind of shown they run it. If they pay him that type of money, they're not going to be paying a whole heck of a lot more money out around the rest of the roster to surround him with. And Manny Machado isn't winning the White Sox anything on his own. There was a rumor for a while that they were one of the bidders for Harper potentially. And I was also worried about that. Again, not so much that I thought Harper would be bad or that he would mail it in once he got paid, but I thought he'd be asking for a trade a couple years in when it would become obvious the White Sox were not going to put any talent around him either. The White Sox don't operate like a large market team, even though they're in Chicago. They play second fiddle to the Cubs. They're really kind of run like a mid-market team. And mid-market teams don't spend almost $200 million and don't give players 7, 8, 9, 10-year contracts and end up having it work out, do they? That's not normally the way that works, is it?
Ask Texas about Alex Rodriguez's contract.
Yep.
As a White Sox fan, here's some good news for you. According to Bet Online, here are your current odds for where Machado signs. Your Yankees, excuse me, not your Yankees, the Yankees.
Not my
Sorry.
Yankees.
The Yankees are 1-2. The Padres are 4-1. The Phillies and the White Sox are both listed as 5-1.
That would be encouraging, I would guess. I would hope. The Yankees, if they're the favorites.
I would love to see him go to the Yankees.
Because you're a Red Sox fan and you hate the Yankees.
Yes.
And I hate the Yankees because, well, they're the Yankees. I'm not really sure I understand why the Yankees want to bring on Machado. Where is he going to play? He's going to play short, I guess. But they still have Didi Gregorius. I mean, I understand he's hurt. I know he had Tommy John. He's not going to be out forever. He's going to be out for a couple months. They signed Tulowitzki as a stopgap. They have Andahar at third. They have Torres at second. Do they need Manny Machado? What good does he do? Where's the Yankees' weakness at this point? It's still their starting pitching, isn't it?
Unless Machado's going to be in the rotation, I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, he's made it very clear he's not playing any other position other than shortstop. He does not want to play third base.
Now, is he better than Didi Gregorius when Gregorius is healthy? I think absolutely. I think he's a better player. But to me, again, we're talking about resources, and the Yankees have unlimited funds and unlimited resources. Salary tax or luxury tax be damned. But, you look at that rotation. Severino at the head, who struggled badly in the second half last year. James Paxton, who has all kinds of trouble staying healthy in the 2 spot. Tanaka, who isn't he still pitching with an injury that never got fixed? I mean, he had a pretty solid year last year, but again, he's had some injury questions about him before, and he's not getting any better. I mean, he is what he is at this point, which is a really good pitcher when he's on, and then not so good when he's in a bad stretch. And then their 4 and 5 are J.A. Happ and C.C. Sabathia. Not exactly a rotation that's going to make you tremble in fear, particularly if Severino doesn't return to form, particularly if Paxton can't stay healthy. That could be a major problem. Now, granted, they have a really deep bullpen. Maybe they're going to try the Tampa Bay strategy. Maybe they're just going to run all relievers out there on a regular basis and figure out that the starters they think don't matter. It's not going to work well if that's what they do, but I'm not really sure why the Yankees would want to go that route with their resources. It seems like there are better things to do with their money than give them to either Harper or Machado. You mentioned Philly was another potential location for him. Was that the other option, right? You said in those odds, Philly for Machado? They currently have Juan Segura at short, who's a good, solid player. You said Machado's only going to play short?
That's what he claims.
Can Segura play second? Somehow or another, I feel like maybe he could. Because at third base in Philly is Maikel Franco, who's not been particularly good. The depth chart currently that I'm looking at lists Cesar Hernandez, who I think I saw in an episode of Top Chef one year, at second base. Scott Kingery is also there, and he was supposed to be their phenom from last year, except he just wasn't ready for the majors. Kingery, in theory, could play third or play second and take either one of those spots. It seems like they would have a spot for Machado. I could see him landing there. That would kind of make sense. The Yankees, I just don't see that making any sense for them. And let's be honest, that may be what's depressing the market for both Harper and Machado is what teams out there need them.
Oh no.
That have money.
Oh no.
Why are we oh knowing?
No. So I'm just going through the internet, looking at any new Manny Machado news. You're not going to like this story at all.
Okay.
Manny Machado earlier today posted, apparently his wife just had a baby girl, right?
Okay.
And he just posted a picture on his Instagram of little baby booties with the number 7 on the sole of the shoe. But they're White Sox little baby booties.
Like actually White Sox logos or like?
Yes.
Oh, no. No. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're number 17 on the bottom, which is his brother-in-law Yonder Alonso's number.
Well, Alonso is with the White Sox. The White Sox, apparently, in an attempt to get Machado there, are doing everything but signing his grandmother, because Alonso, they have at first. They also signed John Jay, who apparently is friends with Machado. I'm not sure how or through what circles they met or how they got to know each other, but I believe that was one of the reasons why the White Sox signed Jay. So they were making their pitch. But again, I look up and down the White Sox roster and I see a lot of mediocre players other than Abreu, and Tim Anderson still has a lot of upside, at the shortstop position, and Moncada in second base. So, the middle of their infield has got young talent. Alonso is a good, solid veteran. I look at that pitching staff the White Sox have, and a lot of guys that have upside and not really a lot of production behind it. And Ivan Nova is their number 3. I think I'd rather Ivan Drago as my number 3 if I was the White Sox at this point. Their bullpen is not bad, but Machado doesn't make them a contender. It just seems like a recipe for, hey, this team sucks, and like I said, I've gotten my big contract, and you know what? I'm not really running that hard on that grounder to short. I'm just going to get thrown out anyway. That's what it feels like. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're wrong about the White Sox thing. It wouldn't surprise me, though. I don't know what some of these teams in baseball are doing. This is going to be a common theme, by the way, for anyone who listens to this podcast over the course of baseball season, is hearing me utter the phrase, I have no idea what this insert team, manager, coach, front office is doing, right? That's going to be said quite a lot, I have a feeling, over the course of the year.
Well, our listeners listened to you rant the other day talking about your trip to Mississippi and your drive there. And that was probably a level 9 rant. Wait until baseball season starts and somebody on Randy's fantasy team is getting done in by his manager. We'll get to DEFCON 1 in no time.
If only Mike Scioscia hadn't retired. My favorite whipping boy is finally gone, and I'm not going to be able to talk about him, except maybe in past memories, right? So we'll see where these two guys end up going. But to go back to why what I was saying was before you interjected with the terrible news potentially for my hopes and dreams. That's okay. That's fine. We were talking about why the market may be like this. And you mentioned teams don't want to outlay the number of years and that type of money. Think about the teams that traditionally would spend that type of money. The Yankees. Well, you said they were favorites for him, but again, he doesn't really fit a need the Yankees have. The Red Sox. You're a Red Sox fan. Where would Machado play for them? Nowhere. They don't need him. They have Bogarts. Yeah, they have Bogarts at short. And again, if that's the only position he's willing to play is short, well, that's not a team that's going to really need him either. In the National League, the Dodgers, well, they got a good long look at him. And they saw what he brought to the table, and they chose not to go back to that table. Well, they have Corey Seager coming back, so they don't really need him. The Cubs, that's another big market team. They could have gotten into this, except, again, their offense is pretty well settled. They have Baez, who plays second and plays short, and he'll be at short while Addison Russell is serving his suspension to start the season. And, they've played Baez a lot at short last year and got Ben Zobrist at bats at second. And the way Madden likes to run that roster, he loves using his entire roster to its fullest abilities, which is another way of saying he likes to make sure his best lineup's not on the field on any given day. But he utilizes his bench a lot, and that's not probably going to fit with a guy like Machado, who's going to want to play every single day.
And I also think the Cubs are a little gun shy about giving any kind of big free agent contract to anybody after what happened with Jason Hayward. They're not a team that's used to doing that. It's not like the Yankees or the Red Sox.
And you Darvish too.
Right.
And
right.
And the Darvish.
At least Darvish, I think, probably was an injury, and maybe he comes back and maybe they'll get some of that money back. But that is 2 really bad contracts they've done over the last 2 years. And they're not a team that's used to doing those bad contracts, right? Boston and New York and the Mets and Dodgers, all these big market teams, they're like, yeah, it was a bad contract, so we'll just write it off.
It's a write-off for them. How is it a write-off? They just write it off.
Write it off what?
Jerry, all these big companies, they write off everything.
You don't even know what a write-off is.
Do you?
No, I don't.
But they do. And they're the ones writing it off.
Yeah, I think a lot of what is happening is that, we've talked for years, you and I, about how analytics has changed baseball and how now they're looking for different types of players than they used to. And let's be honest, there's very little difference between some of these aging veterans that aren't getting contracts that are going to get a lot of money than bringing some young kid up and giving them league minimum. There's very little difference in what you are getting in stats, wins above replacement value. It's all basically the same, right? So if that allows you to save a few $1 million here and a few $1 million there, they're going to do that.
Not going to disagree with that.
And that's kind of the difference. Would you rather give a ton of money to a guy like Mike Moustakas, who's probably going to garner somewhere, $9 or $10 million a year, when you can give, league minimum to some kid that's coming up who's, younger, hungrier, probably more versatile, can play different positions? I feel like the market has kind of changed. Plus, the other thing that we haven't talked about, which is absolutely a thing, is if there's so many teams that are basically in tear down build-up mode, a guy like Mike Moustakas doesn't do you any good, right? A guy like Carlos Gonzalez does you no good. A guy like Marwin Gonzalez does you no good in those situations. You want to bring up your young talent, let them play, figure out what you have, let them get better. And you don't want to be paying anybody any kind of salary because you're probably not going to finish very well anyway.
That's a good point. To remind again our listeners, we do have the Trading Places bet on Bryce Harper, the classic $1 on where he's going to end up. And I kind of got good odds on that because you took Washington, as you mentioned a little bit earlier here in this podcast. I took the field, and I still feel good about that. You still feel good about Washington ending back up with them. I think we had talked about it before. There was really no reason for Washington to not end up with him back on their team, right? Because they lost a lot of salary in the offseason, basically made a way to re-sign him at a large amount of money. I really don't think the money is the issue when it comes to Harper and Washington. I think it's, as you said, it's all about the length of the contract.
The risk.
Yeah. And I blame Scott Boras for this.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, the more money you get, then the bigger percentage that goes to him and the bigger check he gets cut. And he's given players bad advice on more than one occasion. Go ask Greg Holland, who turned down a qualifying offer from Colorado last year to go back there and ended up signing for pennies on the dollar with the Cardinals. And then that ended up not working out. And I don't even know, where is Greg Holland these days? You know what he's not? He's not getting paid like a $14 million a year contract like he would have been if he had taken the qualifying offer from Colorado like he should have. I believe that was a Boras contract. But again,
he was recently signed by the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Well, it won't be to close. And I can't imagine it's for $14 million that he got paid.
It was a 1 year, $3.5 million deals with an additional $3.5 million in incentive bonuses.
And the money he made last year and this year won't add up to the contract that he turned down last year. I'm pretty sure on the advice of Boras. But, Boras is good if you're like that superstar guy. And, if you're like a Bryce Harper, because he's looking out for your best interest. And I think those second level, third level players tend to slip through the cracks when it comes to how he represents them. But going back to Harper, looking at Washington last season, guys that are no longer with them as far as contracts go, Tanner Roark is gone, correct? He was making close to $6 million. Now he got replaced by Patrick Corbin, so that may have ended up being a slight increase in salary to some extent. You have Gio Gonzalez made $12 million last year for Washington. He's gone, correct? Jason Worth was still being paid, and he got $10.5 million last year. I believe that contract's come off the books, correct?
That is correct.
That right there, just between those two guys, That's 20. Harper made $21 million last year.
Right.
So 21 plus 22 is 43. The money's there. It's not that Washington doesn't have the money. But my guess is if he was going to Washington, he would have taken that contract already. Originally, I thought the Dodgers were going to be the team that signed him. And I thought when they moved, who was it? It was Kemp and Puig in the trade that they made, which was basically where they traded the two of them and somebody else, and they got back Homer Bailey and a pack of used condoms and an old media guide from like the Brooklyn Dodgers days. When that was what they traded those guys, it was literally just a salary dump. And my thought was they've opened up outfield slots. This is where they signed Harper, except they didn't, which really surprised me. My thought is, if you're Harper, as young as you are, don't you just take and just say, I'll take as much money as I can on like a shorter deal, a 4 or 5 year deal, maybe a 6-year deal. And I'll just hit free agency again at the age of 30, 31, 32, and I'll still get another big payday. And again, it won't be a 10-year deal, but wouldn't someone, let's say if you're Harper and you signed a 5-year deal now, you're 31 going on 32, isn't someone going to give you a monster 5-year deal as long as you're productive? And then essentially you will have gotten your 10-year deal. It just would have been split up in two. I would think that would be very possible, right?
Once you get to a point, I mean, again, these are things I don't know because I'm not in this kind of economic stratosphere. Are you really going to notice a difference between 300 million and 400 million? I mean, I'm not trying to be flip here. I feel like 300 million, you don't have to worry about anything ever the rest of your life.
There's money and there's FU money. And that's FU money, isn't it? Where it's like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You're right. 300 million, 400 million, at some point you're like Scrooge McDuck diving into the bank of your coins. I mean, you have so much money, you don't know what to do with it.
One thing that you did miss was that Corbin cost a lot more money than you thought he did. 24 million a year.
That's a lot of money for Patrick Corbin.
Like I said, it's a lot more than you thought. It's
my God.
Yeah. 6 years, 140 million.
That's actually kind of astounding to me that Washington gave Patrick Corbin that much money. I didn't realize the contract was that large. I didn't sign the check, so I'm going to plead my ignorance on that. But wow, that's a lot of money for Patrick Corbin. He was good last year, but no one's confusing him with Max Scherzer or Corey Kluber, are they? Or even on his own team with Strasburg, who can't stay healthy, it feels like half the time, but is just a much more talented player with a lot more upside. He's not even the second best pitcher on his own team. I can't believe they gave him that much money. I feel like that's an overpay, but then again, that may be part of the landscape of the way free agency is going. And I think that's going to be part of the problem, as there's rumblings coming out that the players union or players are grumbling to Tony Clark, who's head of the Major League Players Union, about the state of free agency. And I've seen articles written that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. I don't really know if there's a problem here. And that's something we're going to talk about actually in our next podcast. We're going to do another one on baseball. We're going to be talking about more about free agency, but we're going to get, rather than the individual free agents, I think we'll talk about the ramifications, whether or not we're going to see any changes. Are there changes that can be made? I'm not really sure there can be. And there's a lot of other potential rule changes that are on tap that the players union and the owners are discussing, some that would radically change things in the way things are done in baseball from the way they've been done for literally 100 and something years in the past. And that will be a lot of change. And baseball is not usually a sport you associate with change, but we may be seeing a good bit of it in the very near future. But that'll be for our next podcast. I think in the meantime, this is a good spot to wrap it up. Stephen, why don't you go ahead and take us out on this one?
Thanks a lot for listening. Please check us out on excruciatingpodcast.com, where you can find all the different ways that you can listen to us. And we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast. Check us out at excruciatingpodcast.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms and follow us on Twitter at excruciatingpod. See you at the next episode.